Let's now talk about Russia. The Wagner Group, a mercenary group led by Yevgeny Prigozhin that fought alongside Russian troops in Ukraine, decided to turn against Putin and threatened to storm Moscow. This led Putin to flee the capital and the mayor of Moscow to shut down major places, leaving the city on high alert. Ambassador, even though he agreed to not storm Moscow in the end, how do you think this has affected Putin's credibility in Russia?
Well, my impression was, but reinforcing my view, is that so many commentators on TV, on the news, on CNN, have made the same point, that inevitably this development has weakened the position of Putin. It made him look weak. It brought to everyone's attention the fact that Prigozhin, he had in fact pointed out that there was no reason for the invasion of Ukraine. This undermines the entire justification that Putin has used for the war in Ukraine. So I think that position was undermined. The fact that indeed this occurred at all, it shows, and that people didn't object. In Rostov, when the military forces of Prigozhin were moving north, nobody stopped them. So, you know, who knows if they'd gone all the way, I guess Moscow would have been better prepared. But it makes it look a bit like Putin is not really in control of what's happening.
So, Professor, do you think that the Wagner Group can still make a comeback, although the leader is now in Belarus?
I think there is a possibility there because what they are fighting against is the Russian regular army, you know, the Defense Department, just try to incorporate them into the regular, you know, Russian armed forces. So that would be a problem. Just like in Africa, you know, a few months ago in Sudan, when you have the militia, which feel that they were more militant, they were fighting, the regular army is not doing that much, and then they are not giving enough provision to fight the war. So there is a question there saying we are doing all the dirty job, and then we are not given enough of the provision, and yet the regular Russian armies, where you know, what are you doing? And you try to incorporate us into part of you, and just, you know, basically trying to destroy us. So this is almost like a preemptive strike from the, you know, the Wagner Group, saying, hey, we are doing all this, and you know, we try to tell Putin that, you know, your defense people are not doing the job, and you don't listen. We have to do this kind of trying to show that there is a problem here. But also this show that Putin may be blinded by his own advisors, not knowing, you know, the real problem is. So yes, it weakened Putin, but I think Wagner Group is a very strong nationalist group. You know, it has, you know, the reason I said it's better in fighting because they fought wars in Mali, in Central African Republic. They have real fighting experience, and then right now maybe in Sudan as well, but also right now in Ukraine. So that's why they are not happy. I have seen a lot in Africa, like in Mali, the military were not happy. The government didn't provide them enough of provision to fight the extreme Islamists, and they come back to overthrow the government. So this happened, okay, a lot. So I'm not surprised that they are not happy. But once they show their position, and maybe Putin is alarmed, but also maybe understand the issue, saying, well, you know, you are the most capable forces, and we're going to try our best to provide you with all kinds of provision so you can fight for us. So that's why I don't, you know, preclude that they are coming back.
So, Ambassador, what do you think will happen in Ukraine, as the professor mentioned, that Putin could actually reinforce and give the Wagner Group what they want?
They may, but under a different leadership, under the regular army leadership, it's not clear that they would perform as well or in the same way. I mean, Prigozhin was noted for being his brutality, which, many of the soldiers came out of prisons. They were brutalized themselves and therefore brutal in their treatment of others. It's not clear that this is necessarily going to be a big advantage for the problems that the Russian military's already had. On the other hand, we also see that Ukraine has been stalled in their counteroffensive. They haven't made great strides.
Could this give them ammunition to actually do more, given that there's infighting within the Russian military?
I think that's the hope of all the countries that are like the United States that are supporting the Ukrainians. The hope is that this will be a new incentive, that perhaps also the Russian people and the Russian military are a bit spiritless now in light of the events that have just taken place.
So you wouldn't be surprised if there was a coup within Russia, in Moscow?
If the oligarchs think this guy is really not doing the job for us, there's always that possibility, I think.
So, Professor, you talk about the experience maybe in Sudan or in other African countries. Do you see more mercenary groups that come together to rebel against Putin? And will he push the nuclear button if that really happens?
Well, I don't think he will push the nuclear weapon, but I think, this, as someone who studied African coup, sometimes people say if you overthrow a dictator, that's a good coup. And if you are throwing a civilian government, popularly elected, that's not a good coup. But sometimes when you define it's a good coup, and then you will encourage other people to do the same thing. So I asked my student, I said, if Kim Jong-un or Putin have been overthrown in a military coup, would that be a good coup? The answer is always like, what come after that? If another military strongman come in, that's not a good coup.
With the power vacuum and all.
Yeah, but if there's a fast transition to a multi-party democracy, yeah, that would be a good coup. But for Putin, I think himself right now, this is almost, I found it very similar to what happened during World War I. When Russia has an internal problem, they withdraw from World War I. And so you have a civil war within Russia, and Russia didn't fight against the German anymore. So maybe if there is some kind of thing, and then there will be a voice within Russia saying, we are busy with this, so let's have a peace or at least a truce with Ukraine. So we might find some kind of armistice if Russia has that one. But to reach a peace agreement, then it depends on what kind of regime that will come up after the coup. So it might happen, but I don't think Putin will try nuclear. Go nuclear is so dangerous. I think he knows.
But going back to the elephant in the room here, since we're in Asia, in Taiwan, do you feel Xi Jinping is watching what's going on in Moscow?
Oh, absolutely. I think probably he's got the self-satisfaction of feeling that, well, this would never happen in China. And therefore, even though apparently he's made a call or had some communicated that he's supportive of Russia during this difficult time, I think it's got to affect his opinion of Putin, who probably doesn't see Putin to begin with as his equal. Certainly in terms of power, certainly in terms of the means at his disposal to lead his country. So I think it's got to be gratifying to Xi Jinping. It could also be a little bit worrisome because this is a major ally. They're friends forever, as they described it. And this friend isn't doing so well, and actually has been sort of an embarrassment for their strategic relationship. So, but on the other hand, it could also reinforce in his own mind, if we are not doing well in an attack on Taiwan, if it should come to that, we have to be far more brutal, far more extreme than what Russia's been, where they've made no progress really at all since, they occupied the eastern provinces of Ukraine and earlier Crimea as well. So it's hard to predict what particular lessons But I think in general, it's not going to be that encouraging for Xi Jinping. On the other hand, it may make him much tougher in the future. That's possible as well.
Professor, how worried do you think Xi Jinping is looking at the situation in Moscow now?
Well, of course, I mean, he worry about the collapse of Putin. He must be worried about this, just like China after Tiananmen Square. At that time, Ambassador was the political chief of the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. And China looked at what happened to Eastern Europe. And China decided, hey, especially Russia, the former Soviet Union, you have the perestroika, you want to have economic restructuring, but you also have glasnost, political opening. China said, wow, the end result is this? No, we cannot. We cannot have political opening. So that's why you have Tiananmen, crackdown. I think China look at Russia right now, another lesson that you need to learn. You need to be staying firm. If you want to invade Taiwan, it has to be a very short, quick kind of operation. Once it drags on, it's not going to be helpful to your stability to your regime.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have for today.